Welcome to season 3 of the Fresh and Fired Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Marshall, joined today by my co-host, the wild online fitness and nutrition coach, Haley Pindle. She finally decided to grace us with her presence.
No, I've been missing out these past few weeks.
Yeah.
But we got a good one. We got a good one today.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Coming in hot 2025. Excited to be inspiring you in excellence, health, fitness, and business. Let's get fired up.
Yeah.
I was waiting to see if you're going to repeat. All right, we are pumped because we have a special guest for you guys today. It is Dr. Camilla Moore. She helps ambitious leaders, high-achieving professionals, and business owners prevent burnout because she herself experienced burnout while building her own multi-six-figure business. She combines her personal journey as well as 16 years of clinical expertise to create a unique approach to sustainable success without burning out. It's great. She's going to tell us more about her background and the evidence-based solutions that she uses through her courses, her programs, and she even has one-on-one coaching. Excited to hear more about that. But her approach helps many entrepreneurs, executives, and professionals balance their career with their personal priorities, as well as identifying hidden stress triggers that often can go unnoticed. So I think this is a very great topic, and we're going to let it go where it goes today because there's so many ways we could talk about the topic of burnout, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say on it. So welcome, Dr. Camilla Moore.
Thank you, guys. I'm really excited to be here.
Good. Yeah, I'm happy that we were able to connect, and we otherwise don't really know, like there's lots of guests we have on that, you know, one of us has met in person. We don't really know each other. So as much as our listeners are getting to know you, we want to get to know you too. So how about just start with some of your story, and then we can dovetail into how we are going to help all of our listeners prevent burnout.
That is a lofty goal. I'll do my best. But it's 2025, and I feel like we should have these big goals, right? It's the beginning. And that's what we're going to shoot for. So I'm a chiropractor by trade. I have a board certification in lifestyle medicine and certified to teach the Harvard-based stress management program. And so that's what I do. You know, I had my private practice for about 16 years and sold that in 2018. Was really beginning to get kind of tired of the grind of the owning the practice, running the practice, all of those things that go with private practice these days in healthcare. And so I sold it and had an offer to start a chiropractic department at one of our major health institutions, which I did, and was doing some research with Brown University at the time, and COVID hit. And so I was, we had done, I think at this point, like 6 years of fertility treatments, and I had a new baby and COVID, and, we never shut down. A lot of chiropractors through the pandemic never shut down. And even though we were part of a big hospital system, we were able to stay open and serve patients. And by the time all of that happened, I hit the wall pretty hard. And there was an opportunity. There was some reshuffling in the organization. I had an opportunity to either go back into private practice or do something different, and I jumped headfirst into all of my stress management and burnout prevention and have not looked back.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you for filling us in on some of the details. I think there's a lot to this topic, and I know you have multiple approaches to help people with this. So what would you recommend we start off with?
So I always find it really helpful to maybe clarify some of the terminology, because there's a lot of vocabulary that's floating out there that we use interchangeably that's not necessarily accurate. So we have short-term stress, we have long-term stress or chronic stress, and then we have burnout. And those are three different things. There's a lot of overlap, but short-term stress is what you would think the day-to-day stress, right? So like you're driving down the interstate, going to work, you get cut off, you white knuckle it, your heart rate goes up, you start sweating a little bit, your breath changes, but I use he because, he blows by you, the threat has passed, your heart rate goes down, you are able to recover and you go back to baseline. So that is a normal stress response, right? And that's what we really think about as fight or flight. there is a threat or a perceived threat, and that's an important piece that our brain will respond the same way whether the stress is real or not. And this is where things like trauma comes in, and what we remember to be a threat and not necessarily what is a threat in that moment. Chronic stress is that same situation, driving to work, get cut off, white knuckle it, but before you have a chance to recover, you maybe get to the office and the front desk is out for the day, or this person is out for the day, or like there's this crisis and that crisis and this fire. And so you don't have the time to recover, and you stay at this elevated pace for a longer period of time. And so if you don't have time throughout the day to decompress from those stressors, or you have a mechanism or a strategy at the end of the day or at the end of the week to decompress, then that stress builds up over time. And we see this in the literature. We see this in the research, where we know chronic stress will lead to chronic disease. And we see this with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. We see this with a higher risk of heart disease, major adverse cardiac events. And so that's where it starts to become a real physical issue. Burnout has components of stress, but you are in stress response within burnout. But burnout is more of an environmental issue, where you are giving so much of yourself that is not either received, heard, appreciated, or acknowledged. And so we see that as its own language, with its own language. We see that with like, it doesn't matter whether I'm here. What's the point of doing this? And that's where we start seeing that cynicism kind of creeping in. We see people not really committed to their jobs. They just don't care anymore. They've tapped out and they are fatigued and exhausted all the time. So that is a product of an environmental issue, of the culture of a company or the culture of an office or the culture of your home. That is, you can get burnt out at your own home if you are in a bad relationship. Anywhere where like what you are giving is not acknowledged, received, and appreciated. So that can create stress. But those are different components. And the reason it's important to understand the difference is because you're going to approach the treatment, and the strategy for them is very different.
Interesting. That's good.
So I hope that helps clarify a few things.
It does. Yeah. No, that's a really great place to start. Haley, what have you got?
So I am interested, when you were talking, Camilla, like, how do you diagnose where someone is at?
So it's not so much a diagnosis, because I reserve that term to like in-office treatment, right? And so there is a medical form, a questionnaire, the Burnout Assessment Questionnaire, that they can use in a medical setting. But for me, where we go through and I look at clients and people that I'm coaching and working with, it's a conversation. And so what we do is we break down those differences. And so we have conversations about what is your daily stress. We start looking at things in a different perspective, right? Because if we want different outcomes, we have to change our perception and our mindset and our behavior to get those different changes. And so one of the shifts that we start looking at is, instead of looking at your life in terms of tasks or responsibilities, we look at it through, and this is just an exercise we do, through the lens of energy. And so like, where is your energy going? And so it's a brain dump, essentially, of like, what are all of the tasks and responsibilities that you have? Who are the people in your life? What are the relationships like? And then, do they give you energy, or are they draining energy? And once we can start applying a quantitative measure to these more abstract feelings, then we can start really getting into the nuances of each individual person.
Okay.
Does that help?
Very much so. My question, because everyone perceives stress a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. So how do you go about like de-escalating how someone perceives a stressor?
Could you say that? What do you mean, how they perceive it?
So maybe someone works a lot, they love what they do, and then like they're feeling a little bit drained. Maybe some things are happening at home, and like something happens, and their perceived like vision of that situation is maybe a little bit more stressful than they need to make it?
So your question.
Yeah, it's interesting. Can I expand on what I think you're getting at, Haley? But you could correct me if I'm wrong. It's like people have different thresholds for stress. I kind of, and I feel like training that, or I don't know what terminology you would use, Camilla, but it's interesting. I think about like my brother who's special forces military. He's not anymore, but he was. And like his ability to handle like a higher level of stress compared to someone who is not like trained for highly stressful situations. Right? Like versus, so you could take a side by side, they're both in the same environment, they both had the same things happen to them, and you're like, oh wow, you are handling this way better than this person who's like, actually your situation is not that bad. It's more like how you're viewing it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Thank you.
I see what you're saying. So there's two thoughts that come to mind initially, because as you're talking, the thing that, one of the things as far as being a chiropractor, and Emily, I think you can appreciate this, is like one of the unique features of being human is that we cannot feel each other's pain. And so stress and pain are very similar in that way, where my experience and your experience of what pain is very individual and unique to me, as is yours. And we have no way of physically feeling what the other one is actually. We have a pain scale and we can grade it, but like, how do you know if like your 10 isn't, my 20? And like,
well, that's what I was going to say. Okay, just to interject, you have a patient come in and they put 10 out of 10 pain, or they'll write 11 beside it. I'm like, dude, you're still walking. The last guy that came in literally was doubled over, practically crawling in, leaning on, someone else to get here. And he marked it as like a 6. And you're like, okay, this does not line up, right?
Yes. So what is very interesting about stress and I think about pain, because those two things are very linked neurologically and endocrinologically.
I know what you mean. Like your endocrinology.
They are.
We got you. Yeah.
Yes. And the first thing I think to note with this conversation is, one, it's an exercise in compassion, because we don't know, right? We don't know. That 10 out of 10 for that person may be their threshold. That may be the worst pain that they felt, or it may be the point where they have that's it for them, And so and these are the limitations that we have with scales like that. But what is very interesting with stress in particular is that we know that it comes from two different places. And this, Haley, directly, I think, answers that question that you had, is it comes from two distinct sources. One, our genetic code. We know that what our mothers experience for stress has trickled down into our DNA. And those are epigenetic factors that can either express those genes or not express those genes. So we know that, and we know that that those genes are carried down from generation to generation. So you are literally carrying not just the genes for like your hair, your skin, your eyes from your great grandmother, but you're also carrying her experiences and how that embedded itself in her genetic code. So we know that there are genetic traits that go along with, one, our baseline, like what we perceive to be stress, and also how we respond to that stress is. The second thing, and this speaks to your brother, is our stress and how we respond to that is also directly linked to our experiences. And so what happens in our brain, that pathway between the amygdala and the prehippocampus and the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. So we have these different parts of our brain where the amygdala is kind of like picking up the sensory part and saying, this is a threat. And it's communicating with your hippocampus, which is holding the memories of those threats and what happened during that time. And then your prefrontal cortex is in the front of your brain. And that's something that makes us uniquely human, right? This is our personality. This is our logic, our problem solving. And at that point, your prefrontal cortex is saying, wait a minute. This is different than this old situation, or it's new. It's the same as this old situation, but it's really the executive center that is driving and managing your response to this. So what we know is that your experiences factor into that pathway and the expression of what you do with it, but also your history. And that's where things like meditation and yoga, these mind-body exercises, these mindfulness exercises that will strengthen the prefrontal cortex, That's why you feel less stress with things like meditation, because that is helping to manage that innate response of the amygdala, which is our fear-based center, and the memories in the hippocampus, and that pathway and that communication. So we can really shift and change. The malleability of our brain and our body is really impressive. And so when I work with clients, these are the things, is like, what is stressful? And remembering that at the root of each stress is a fear. And so that's one of the things that we try to get to, is that root fear. It's one of the exercises that we do too. So those are the two main factors that go into like how an individual will respond, perceive what they perceive to be threatening and stressful, and how they respond to it.
Interesting.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
I love the brain. It's so interesting. But I'm just curious, do you think that you can train your threshold of stress, or do you think it's more a matter of someone has a threshold and it's just getting to your stress and completing the cycle before you start again? And like,
yeah, so it's a good question, and that has actually been studied. We have studied that specifically with meditation and yoga. And so what we know is that not only when they and there's a whole different and let me just back up. When we talk about stress relief and we talk about techniques, meditation and mindfulness and things like yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, that's in one group. But understanding that that's not, one, going to work for everybody, and two, that we are more than just that. That's where the healthy habits really make a difference. And we know this too. The sleep, we had talked about maybe mentioning sleep, and we can get into that. The exercise, nutrition, connecting, our relationships.
But, I just wanted to throw this in, because we do talk a lot about obviously the exercise component, nutritional component on this podcast. We have talked about sleep some. One thing we don't really talk about, which is kind of interesting, because I'm being a chiropractor as well, even just getting adjustments, not that we have to get into the science of all of that, but just like the baseline, if you're not at the point where you can even turn your brain on, they're getting that kickstart with like, okay, do you even have healthy spine, to the point of like, okay, is your prefrontal cortex actually not fully firing, like the whole Heidi Havoc research?
Well, and there's a lot to be said for, we talk about the mind-body connection as if they're two different things, but they are one integrated system. And there is a lot to be said for the physical release of tension to help with the emotional release of tension. And we see that in body work across the board, historically in Western medicine, but also it transcends cultures. And you see this in Eastern medicine, and you see this in Ayurvedic medicine, these ancient medicinal practices that all connect, their therapies and treatments connect the mind and the body as one. But I wanted to say, so you asked me about whether it increases the stress threshold or whether it decreases our perception of stress. Is that right, Haley? That was your question?
More my question was, do you think that stress, like your threshold of stress, can be trained to a higher level, or do you have a threshold and before you do that again, you have to complete the cycle, or you're going to end up burnt out?
So it's both. So what we know is that specifically, again, with research on meditation and yoga, but specifically meditation, we know that those that practice regularly, and it doesn't have to be a lot. I mean, 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, but regularly, will not only have an easier response to stress when it comes in, their perception of what they think is stressful also changes. So yes and yes to that question. You can because really what you're doing is, one of the things that the prefrontal cortex does is focus, right? It's logic, it's problem solving. And what any science defines meditation as a single point of focus. So that can be something like a mantra where you're listening to the same thing over and over again, a listening meditation or breath work. But focusing on that one thing is training your brain to work better. And so it's like training anything else. You're a trainer. You want the body to do something. You understand how it works, what demand you need to put on it to get the expected and the intended result. And the brain is no different. And that's where we talk about sleep and we talk about nutrition and we talk about exercise. It's not just about the body. All those things help the brain function better as well.
Yeah, that's good. You know what that makes me think of, Camilla? Okay, I have a background in competitive gymnastics, and I coach gymnastics right now, but it is a rec, more of like a rec fun competition type of level. I did provincial and then I did national level gymnastics, and we used to train things like, I remember sitting in front of the clock, like in our splits, doing our stretching. We have to stare at the clock and blink every 5 seconds. It almost seems ridiculous, but it was training us to like focus on this task and focus intently to be like, okay, you need to pay attention for X number of minutes till you switch your splits. We were like doing this brain training as we were doing our physical training. And then you use that level of focus to be able to really expand it to visualization. So I talk, even with my little athletes right now that I coach on Wednesday and Friday nights, always talk to them about like how powerful visualization is. And it's amazing. Like they don't fully conceptualize it yet. I feel that they will, right, as you practice through it. Because I know for me, at some point it clicked. And then, I had times where I was out for injuries where I would just be relying fully on visualization before a competition and then still be able to compete and do well.
Yeah. And that the key, the added kind of sauce to visualization is adding in how you would feel, right? That brings in an entirely new element, and it works on a whole new part of the brain. Is like, if you can familiarize yourself not just with what you want to accomplish, but how you feel accomplishing it, that's the secret sauce. And when we talk about things like, and I don't want to get too crazy, but I think we talk about things like manifestation, which is really just goal setting. I mean, it's just goal setting and working towards that, but really being present in that success, all of you. And we talk about mindfulness as this thing that we all want to do, but no one really teaches us how to do it. So I'm going to take a second here and just very easily, if you want to practice mindfulness at any given moment, all you have to do is engage as many senses as you possibly can wherever you are, because that will bring you into the moment where you have to think about, what does it smell like where I am? What can I listen to? What do I hear? What do I see? What do I feel? And so if you can take a few minutes to do all of those things, and you can do this doing anything, that is mindfulness. And what you're talking about with visualization is the same basic thing. You're just creating that moment now.
Yes, because you do it with all the elements. So when you think about and athletes do it in every sport, right? You almost form these rituals of like, I'm going to listen to this certain song. I'm going to do these like certain movements before I step up. I'm going to visualize myself. If I'm thinking, balance beam or floor routine, I'm going to be listening to my music in my ears, and I'm going to be doing my breathing at my certain points. I'm creating the whole experience, even though I might not be physically in the gym. My brain and body think that I am.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. I'll tell you one more thing about that is what you will find is that the visualization part is the easy part. Allowing yourself to feel what it feels like to succeed will tap into your fears of that success, your fears of your achievement, and your, whether you can call it imposter syndrome, you can call it whatever. But when you start engaging your senses and you really have to live it, you will feel if you have any sort of reservation or restriction or concern or fear about it, you'll feel it then. And that's what you have to work through to get to your goal.
Yeah.
That part of it.
I think also it's super important to note with visualization how powerful it is. it can also work against you. So if you are continuously like negatively thinking about the outcome of what's going to happen, like it's like 10 times more likely for it to actually come to fruition. So rather than like dwelling on all the things that are going to go wrong, because they probably will if that's all you're thinking about, kind of switch that, right? And I know that it can sound super woo woo and people get all like weirded out about like manifestation and stuff. Like I talked to my clients about visualization. We just had a vision board little coffee date. But I love it because there is science to it, right?
Yes. I mean, it's goal setting. And we know that if you live your goals, if you write down your goals, if you have to act on it. You can't just sit and wait for it to happen, right? Like that's the other key to this. But, you know, we talk about this like, and this is one of the things that I realized when I was going through my own burnout stuff, is how much my own inner dialogue contributed to my own stress. And like what I was saying to myself inside was creating so much negativity and stress that was, we create our own reality with this. You know, we really do. Like if you know, I think we take that to the extreme where it's easy to start feeling shame and guilt with it. We don't want to go that far, but we do want to feel as empowered that we can change our thoughts and change our behavior. And that's where, like, if you want different outcomes, then you have to have different behaviors. And if you want different behaviors, you have to have a different mindset and a perspective. And that starts with understanding where you are.
Okay, this is interesting. This is kind of it might be a weird example, but I'm thinking about how...
Wait to hear it.
I'm thinking about... So Haley put out a video. I just saw it yesterday. I don't know when you put it out. It was talking about doers and dabblers. I watched your video. Okay. And it was, I liked it. I commented on it. You guys should do that with our content.
Appreciate you.
I know, right? If nothing else, I can rely on Haley and John to comment on my videos. It's great. Anyways,
Emily,
John's my husband.
I will comment on
Oh, thanks. But yeah, I will return the favor. So my whole point in this is the whole like taking action. And I like, because you touched on this, Camilla, it's like, okay, you do need to take action. Sometimes what can happen with goal setting is people will get so stuck in their heads and it'll be so complex. And yes, we know, you know, doing the SMART goals, we have whole episodes on that, and being specific and being realistic and time oriented. Those are all really good things. But if you are not even in a headspace to conceptualize any of that and it's keeping you paralyzed and stuck, simplify it. Just be like, the other day I was thinking this, you know what? It's dark and it's cold where I live. It's northern Alberta, and people interactions go down this time of year. People hibernate, literally. And so I have these moments where I'll get these feelings like, I feel like I want more people interaction. I'm definitely a people person, right? I know that about myself. So I can either head down and be like, well, I have all this stuff to do and I'm not even going to make eye contact with people. Or I can tell myself, okay, the loose goal that's not even a specific goal is like, I just want to have more friendly people interactions. So I can then take the step. I have brought that into my awareness. And now I have all these points in my day where I'm like, I'm at the grocery store. I can head down, not talk to anyone, or at the cashier, like the lady at the cashier. I can just be like, hey, how's your day going? Good. Okay, I'm at school pickup. Smile, look up. I just like say hello to like every other parent at school pickup. And I mean, my kids make fun of me because they're like, oh, hi, how are you? I'm always talking to everyone. But I am actively I am not sitting back waiting for someone to say hello to me when everyone else is stressed, like we're talking about, their heads down, they're thinking about all the stuff they've got going on. But if you can take this simple step of being like, I'm just going to smile and say hello, they're going to smile back. They're going to say hello. It seems like, you know, not that big of an example, but I know for myself, it's a huge example. If I'd have had a few people interactions during my day, it brightens my day, but I hope and think that it also brightens their day. And that can make a whole difference on everything in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not that complicated. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like some things are more complicated, right?
Yeah. Like the video she's mentioning, it was like doers and dabblers are the people who have these big goals, but they're like waiting for the perfect moment to do it. They're like, oh, today is not the right day, I'm not going to do it. And they think that they need to like have everything set perfectly. They need to have the perfect strategy, the perfect list of goals, the perfect execution before they even take the first few steps. Whereas like doers, they, you know, have one or two steps ahead, act on those two steps, and then they don't need to have that whole meal in order to take a couple bites of it, right? So that's kind of what Emily was.
Yeah.
Well, and
But
there's a
I'm saying it can be something as simple as like
Yeah.
smile and say hi to people, or it could be as big as like I
Exactly.
have this specific body image goal or career goal, right?
Exactly. And I've heard a lot of people make a goal of like make more friends this year. And that's a perfect example of like, that's your first step. Like, just do that. You don't need to go and make everyone your friend, but just
Be
look up and
friendly.
smile. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your first step.
Well, and I think, there's two things that reminds me of. One, there's a great formula that kind of sums this up, which is happiness is when reality exceeds expectations, and you can set the expectations. So you can always set yourself up for that success if you're willing to adjust the expectations. And I think that especially in our society where there's such um, an emphasis on achievement and success and all these, underachieve, set smaller goals that you know that you can manage, that you're going to get the wins. And those, because if you keep failing at your own expectations and your own goals, you will fail. But if you change what is really important, and if you have a goal of what is really important and you have that purpose and you just set more smaller steps in between to get there, then you're just moving there at your own pace. And as long as you keep your feet moving, as long as you are going in that direction, this is your life. This is your life. No one else gets to live your life. And so you get to set that pace of what you want to, of how fast you want to get there. But set the expectations and set yourself up for the win.
Yes. Okay, this reminds me of starting with the end in mind. Like this might sound morbid, but if you actually think of your eulogy, right? Do you want, yeah, do you, when people give a eulogy, they tend not to be like, oh, this person did all these XYZ accomplishments. They tend to comment on your virtues and your character. Like this person was full of joy, or this person, whatever, the things that they love about you. You use the word compassion. She was such a compassionate person, more so than she won whatever award, right? Like, so it kind of puts it in perspective of like, what are your goals for character and for virtue and for, what you contribute to others in the world. I think that makes a big difference in how you perceive your day to day.
It's so interesting you say that, because I keep that in mind all the time. And I think one of the things that nothing kind of hits that home more than when you lose something or someone that you really love. And you go through that and you realize that this is a finite amount of time. And so, especially with this business, like I have a 4.5-year-old, he's still in preschool. He's only there 3 days a week. So, I'm busting my butt for these 3 days, when he's in school. But this morning, he wanted to do a puzzle and he's like, Mama, will you play with me? And I just had so many other things that I could be doing. And I just said yes. And that's where, when they trickle down, when you have that bigger goal of like, what do you want to remember? Then you will make the decisions on a day-to-day basis. And I learned that lesson. I don't know if you're a dog people, but I learned that lesson when I lost my dog a few years ago. He was like one of the loves of my life, one of the great loves of my life. And we would get home, I would pick him up at doggy daycare, and we would get home and we would always take just a few minutes to just like cuddle on the bed together. And I remember sometimes just being so tired that all I wanted to do was like go downstairs and, make a cup of tea or something. But I always took the time to do that. And when he passed away, those are the moments I remember, is that you take advantage of every moment that you have with the people that you love. And I use people when I talked about dogs. And, and that's where you end up, where you don't have regrets. And that's why setting those big end game goals are so important, because they trickle down into our daily life.
Yeah, I relate a lot to that. Like last year, so this year, Emily and I pick words. I don't know if you do this, Camilla, but pick words for the year. And
I have one.
Yeah, one of my
What's
words,
your word?
Yeah.
I want to hear Haley's.
Okay, go ahead.
I have two. One is mastery and one is love, because last year I definitely was working my ass off, and I don't regret
Were you though? No, I'm kidding.
I don't regret it at all. I think there are seasons in life, sometimes you do have to put your head down and grind if you want a certain outcome. However, like going a little bit too deep into that makes you realize how like important it is to say like I love you to the people that you love, and actually like embrace the time that you have, because you nailed it on the nose. Like time is finite, right? Money and all these other arbitrary things in life, they replenish. It doesn't really matter. Time is just so precious, and so that's why I picked love as one of my words. But I would love to hear your word.
Mine is authenticity.
I love that.
Yeah, because it's especially with building a business, there's so many different directions that you can go in, and my goal for this year is to just return to that intuitive state of trusting myself. And everything that I put out is not necessarily what the keywords might say, or whether, what Instagram algorithm is working on that day, but just like things that I want to share. And I think people will come into that space and come into the orbit. Who knows? Maybe I'll crash and burn. We'll see. But at least I will feel good about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good.
Emily, now you have to share your word.
Yeah. What is
it? Yeah. I shared on the last episode, so I won't expand on it too much, but it is ready.
Oh, it's a good one.
Ready.
That's a good one.
It's already showing up all the time.
Yeah. I love it.
I told my husband I'm going to be ready on time everywhere we go this year. He's like, okay, in what world? In what world? Anyway, it's going to be good times.
I love that. That's funny.
I love that.
Yeah, but I feel like, no, this has been good. To dive in a little bit more to, before we wrap up, because I mean, there's a lot to unpack. You touched a little bit on the sleep component, but we never really came back to it. So do you want to just tie that into some of the topic we've already been discussing?
I think sleep, I look at all of those factors, right? And like lifestyle medicine has 6 of them, of like what really creates a healthy being. And it's sleep, nutrition, exercise, relationships, healthy relationships, limiting our risky behaviors like alcohol and smoking and all that stuff, and stress management. Like those are the 6 pillars that we have. And I think of all of those, sleep is 1, the most underrated, and 2, potentially the most important, because we look at sleep as a time of what we are not, when we're not doing other things, right? It's almost like that negative space where like nothing really exists, but you need to take a break from working or whatever. But sleep has a huge purpose in regulating our hormones, in regulating our appetite, in regulating our health. And so that is our recovery time. And if you are not sleeping well, nothing else will matter. And so you can support your sleep in a number of ways by, what you eat and how you eat, and exercise, and your stress, and all of those things will influence your quality of sleep. And that's where, like, those doing dry January, one of the things they will notice is how much better they sleep. And a lot of the reason why when you cut out things like alcohol, you lose weight is because you're allowing your metabolism to just be normal again, and your hormones are regulated again. But that sleep component, the recommendation is 7 to 9 hours, but that's different for everybody. And the other thing is that we've kind of fit ourselves into this 9 to 5 world. But you also have to understand that whether you are a morning person or whether you are a night owl, that is a predetermined genetic situation. Like if you are a night owl,
then you always marry the opposite, right?
Totally. Yes.
Sorry, keep going.
I'm up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, and my husband's just like going to bed, you know? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're still married. Good job.
Yeah, still married.
That's awesome. Yeah, us too.
But like, but I mean, he could stay up until midnight, like no problem. Like, but you know, those types of things, and really, we talk about setting yourself up for success, like understanding that, like, you know, you may just, you know, genetically need to stay up a little bit later. You're going to be more productive at night, and working with your system instead of against it.
Yeah, I talk a lot about hormones and the menstrual cycle, and I do know that women do need more sleep than like men do, especially in certain parts of their cycle. Yeah. So it's
we are much more complicated creatures.
Yeah.
We've got a lot more going on.
Yeah.
I mean, physically, we do. Like, I mean,
and you're a deep sleeper. You're a deep sleeper your whole life until you have babies, and then all of a sudden, every sound wakes you up.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's wired.
Women, like their hypothalamus, like their kind of control center in their brain for hormones and like stress and stuff, it's a lot more sensitive, right? So when we aren't sleeping, when we aren't feeding our bodies right, when we aren't like moving our bodies, or maybe we're like chronically like under eating and things like that, like we're just a lot more susceptible to having our hormones. Those little things.
The definition of a hormone is it's a small molecule that has a widespread effect. That is the definition. And so if you look at women and you look, you know, we have on average a 27, 28 day cycle that varies for pretty much everybody on the planet, but that's where it averages out to. So you have to look at that and say every single day, your hormone balance is different. Every single day. It's different, which means that you have different needs. You're going to feel differently every day. And, you know, it's because we have this amazing ability to make babies and make human beings, you know? But sleep is what helps to regulate all of those things, and exercise. I mean, exercise is just so important.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazing. Well, I agree too. And this has been lovely. Is there anything else that you kind of want to wrap up with before we peace out?
Forever. I could talk about this forever, especially like you talking about hormones and stress and perimenopause and menopause and menstrual cycle and all of those, postpartum and pregnancy, all of those things. Like those are multiple broadcasts in and of
multiple. Yeah, we're gonna. You know, we got more coming down.
But I think that those conversations are beginning to happen for women, and you know, it can only be a positive.
For sure. I actually have a little fun story for you guys that I don't know if it's true or not, but I think it's funny. I heard that, you know, back in the day when like witchcraft was everyone thought like people were witches. The witches, they thought they were just women in menopause. So they thought these hot flashes and these crazy things that were happening were just because they were witches. And now we're actually actually, this is actually a process that just happens through the woman body. So.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you're ridiculous.
And they were like, you know, intelligent women that were reading books and doing medicine and things like that. But yes, I mean, like, women have always just confounded men, especially in the medical field. Like they don't really quite understand what's going on with us, and like that, that's just an example of it.
Yeah, it's just the differences, right?
Yeah.
But we still love you, men. Thanks for being around. We love you.
Still love you very much so.
Yes. Yeah, we always say no man bashing here. We love our women. We love our men. We love and appreciate you. And we are so thankful that you're able to join us today, Dr. Camilla Moore. Make sure you guys find her on Instagram. I'm going to put some of her contacts in our show notes so you can connect with her, because she's an amazing resource and you're just awesome to work with. So thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Share the show, guys. Make sure you rate, review, and if you haven't clicked subscribe yet, especially on YouTube, click that subscribe button. And in the meantime, be free, feel fresh, and live on fire. All right.